So, switching gears a bit, what is it we can learn from Losar? As I said, we're not doing the entire practice. We couldn't if we wanted to. And besides, it's the wrong time. As I mentioned, the practice of Losar, which means literally New Year in Tibetan, happens over a period of anywhere from 3 days to about 2 to 3 weeks. And there are sort of 3 primary stages, and the first begins 3 days before the New Year. But part of what we did earlier in the practice, the purification breaths, was also just attending to and clearing a bit the inner space. Now, in the Tibetan culture, this is really sort of about a community practice together, or there is a family community, or people who will gather at a temple and really shine it up, getting out the peacock feathers to clean off the altar, the Buddhas. This is very common in Tibetan Buddhism. If you have a peacock feather, it is seen to be among the purest objects. You don't clean it with a rag. You won't touch the Buddha with, what are those things? The little Swiffer dusters that are made out of some kind of microchemical particles. But peacock feathers are seen to be pure, that they will keep and they will actually add to the purity of an altar, a Buddha, or of a sacred object. And so there are many different dimensions that characterize this, and especially the practice space. That if your practice space has sort of gotten dusty or heavy in any way, cluttered, then to sort of begin by cleaning the practice space, and which also helps to clear the space of our mind when we practice in that space. The other part of it is renewing intentions as part of that. And whenever I do a home retreat here in this room that we have at home, the retreat begins with the cleaning. It begins with coming in, cleaning the floor, cleaning this friend of mine behind me. Thank you, Marie. And basically just, shining up the place, as well as doing things like burning sage, burning certain herbs and certain kinds of floral incense. And part of that is also clearing the energy of the space. If we consider that Losar also is that which was considered a pre-Buddhist thing, that we can find some of the more ancient practices there in the Bon tradition, of the pre-Buddhist Bon tradition, which is more shamanic. We'll see how some of that entered into also and was fused a bit with the Vajrayana teachings, especially around the deities and the wrathful deities. But that's also a time in that sort of pre-Losar, that first sort of the second day before or third day before, has to do with food preparation. And so there's a lot of cooking, there's a lot of preparing for the feast that then happens on the second day, which is the day before the New Year, which would have been yesterday for us. And so there's cooking, there's chang, which is barley beer that apparently is drunk throughout the day. I can't drink alcohol in the morning. I'm no good for the rest of the day. But this is something that is done with a spirit of joy. It's done with a spirit of fellowship and really beginning to change or rather relinquish or purification also within the heart, the spirit of community and family. So that's a big part of it. And this is one of the reasons why I said, in the email that I sent back to everyone, consider having some of these things on hand. If you don't, it's fine. But instead of having barley beer, I thought, a really good wholesome tea. So in that regard, I have this very cool, it's organic mountain tea. I don't know if you can see this, but it's really and herbs. This was actually a gift given to me by a friend. And so I've been brewing that this morning as something wholesome for the body, as clearing, as cleansing for the body. So that first stage of Losar is characterized by that, by these activities and these qualities. And then the second day, yes, that's all in one day. It takes me that long usually just to clean my space, much less making food and such, but there we are. I can't imagine making barley beer in one day, but it's a process, and it's a community endeavor. The second day then involves now creating auspicious circumstances. It involves now not just sort of cleaning and clearing and purifying, but also now beginning to invest in what are the auspicious conditions that we need to flourish. And so here we find on the second day is where the feast usually happens, community food and feasting, and also dispelling negative energies, anything that gets in the way of our spiritual practice. And this involves removing obstacles. And so here we may practice in Vajrayana. What is practiced is we begin practicing with wrathful deities, or Dharma Pala, which are Dharma protectors in the form of these wrathful, frightening beings, these wrathful forms of the Buddhas. And these are representations of the power to really protect our space from anything that is in any way a challenge or an obstacle to our progress towards awakening. And so part of this is dispelling those negative energies by, perhaps for me, it has to do with chanting to Mahakala, who is a wrathful deity, this big scary beings with teeth. I mean, he's really quite imposing. And yet the wrathful quality of these beings is not a destructive force. It's not a force imbued with hatred, but rather fierce compassion. Nothing gets near these beings. So if you ever see these forms of wrathful deities in the form of Mahakala or Vajrakilaya, and there are a number of these, that they're really there as protectors of the space of Dharma, and nothing gets through them. They are motivated by fierce compassion, by this sort of devotion to our well-being and to easing suffering. That's the motivation. Not destroying but unless you're a demon, in which case you should be scared. And often you'll see, this is carried over from some of the earlier Hindu traditions, where you'll see someone like Kali or Durga trampling on the skulls of demons, on the heads of ignorance. And this is all sort of the iconography of empowering ourselves against ignorance, delusion, the things that cause suffering in this world. And so it's also this quality of pristine wisdom imbued with fierce love, what we might call tough love, but with the right intention and the right clarity. So a lot of this happens then here on the second day. Traditionally, they will set off firecrackers. I don't know how they did this in the 14th century. I don't know if gunpowder was invented yet or not, but basically noise making, torches made of certain grasses, I think of pine branches and herbs, that are there to ward off that negative energy. The firecrackers, interestingly, are there to kind of wake up any kind of negative energies and say, don't even think about it. Talk to the hand, talk to the mudra. So it's, it's meant to be an empowerment and a protecting of the space in the community. And often, if we practice with a wrathful deity, what I often will do is begin with my own mind. I may chant the Mahakala Om Mahakala Humpe, which is the chant to this wrathful deity that is the Dharma protector that I've worked with. And first, protect my mind so that it is fully open to practice without obstacles or hindrances. And then practice, and then protecting the space of practice, space here. And then protecting others who are practitioners. Protecting these concentric circles begin to widen, protecting all Dharma practitioners, protecting all practitioners. I take it beyond even Dharma practitioners, those who are practicing love, those who are practicing wisdom, those who are seeking an evolution of consciousness on whatever path they're on. May they be protected, beyond just the raft that maybe I'm sailing on. And so it becomes a universal aspiration to protect all who are really dedicated to evolving our world, our humanity, our enlightenment. So what I've kind of put together here is, since I don't have firecrackers, I don't have torches here. I don't know if you do. Maybe you do. I don't know. But maybe you were so inspired about today's theme that you went out and you got all these things. Yeah. But I think, for our purposes, this is maybe what we're learning from this tradition, is how important it is to practice some kind of ritual. And even if it's simply lighting a candle, to set the intention, the wholesome intention, the brightness and the warmth of the fire element, maybe lighting several candles. So we'll do that in a bit. And then the last thing about this second day, I think, is creating the conditions that are auspicious by re-centering our vows, our intentions. Whether it's a bodhisattva vow, we'll be reading in a bit, we'll be looking at other vows that from this book, Chanting from the Heart. But it's a way to also set your own motivation, just as we do with the aspiration prayer at the beginning. And of course, drinking more tea. I think that the barley beer continues on the second day. I actually did have a little bottle of sake last night that I've really been getting into. I didn't have the whole thing because when I realized that it was 15% alcohol and I was getting sleepy, and I thought, I can't really prepare anymore for tomorrow. I'm just, I was out. I won't be doing that either. So I'm sticking with the tea. And then on the third day, which is today, New Year's Day, the tradition then begins with making offerings, often smoke offerings of some kind, incense. Here, incense that is very auspicious, and some of the main ones are things like sandalwood. Aloes wood is a purifying, it's a beneficial incense to sort of invoke and invite good things, good conditions, as well as inviting the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas into your space by offering these incense qualities. I have a vanilla sandalwood incense that is really, it's a little sweet, but it's also robust. But not everybody can do incense. Not everybody, some people are really allergic to it. If you start burning it even a little bit, they start sneezing or coughing. And so that's why if you prepared anything like essential oils, you can buy sandalwood or sage essential oils and put them in a diffuser or in a little spray bottle where you can just sort of spritz around in the room. It's whatever it is that makes sense to you. You don't have to do this today, but it's really helpful to sort of begin also doing this as an invitation. So smoke offerings, traditionally flowers, and what's called the first water. The first water is seen to be the purest form of water. If you live in the mountains or in the Himalayas in particular, assuming that there is water flowing, that there continues to be streams and so on, the first water of the year is seen to be very important. It's the clearest, it's the most purified somehow. And so here there is a ritual done to offer the first water and offer gratitude for this water to the water spirits. So again, here we have this notion of these more shamanic or pre-Buddhist beings that are inhabiting the landscape. And the water spirits often are seen to be like nagas. Naga can be dragon or serpent, but these are beings that are seen to be auspicious. They help us with the freshness and the energy of the practice. As I mentioned, flowers. So having flowers, what I'll do later, and I can do it on your behalf if you don't have any of these things, is to basically pour some purified water into a dish and then offer the flower and place the flower petals into the bowl. It's a nice way to also honor as an offering. Gratitude is a big part of this as well. Maybe perhaps what we might think of as gratitude to our benefactors, gratitude to those who have maybe helped us on the path or have taught us how to love in an unconditional way. Maybe it's even, these are places. So benefactor can be a place on a mountainside that for you has really been sacred or has been a place where you have found great refuge. It could be a deity, a being of some kind, or an ancestor or a family member, perhaps, someone who's living or who's no longer living. Maybe it's an animal, it's a pet, or it could be a tree. Yeah, there is no limit to who has impacted our lives and our practices in profound ways. And so offering gratitude also to teachers, to the monastic community. People will often go to the temple on this day and make their offerings and listen to Dharma talks, and there will be recitations and that kind of thing, as well as renewing vows, renewing the vows, the commitment to how to live, and the auspicious circumstances that were created on the second day now creating a pathway, an opening to a reconnection, a recommitting for the benefit of all beings. So the last part of Losar that I'll be sharing today has to do with something that is very much a part of the practice of the new year. And that is removing obstacles. There is this being, this wrathful being called Vajrakilaya. Vajrakilaya, if you remember what I said earlier, that he is a scary looking wrathful deity with wings. He is seen to be a Heruka in Vajrayana. Heruka is like a bird in the form with wings, and bird as a very fierce example of fierce compassion, wisdom. And Vajrakilaya as a wrathful being is often invoked both by in terms of dispelling negative energy, especially energy that is hostile to compassion. So that's one of the areas that Vajrakilaya, when we chant the Vajrakilaya mantra, and we visualize this deity or this being that ultimately represents qualities that we ourselves embody. That anything that is hostile or negative towards compassion, unconditional love, that Vajrakilaya is there to completely dispel. as well as removing obstacles to our spiritual progress on the path. So that's a big part of creating auspicious circumstances. And a very important part of that is to sort of free up, both within the mind and also just within the world, the sort of the mystical world, the world of spirits and beings and deities and bodhisattvas, that we're actually also clearing the path for abundance, and an abundance of resources, of life, of love, and so on. And then the last one is that Vajrakilaya represents the enlightened activity of all the Buddhas. So he kind of has this threefold purpose. Removing negativity hostile to compassion, removing obstacles or hindrances on the path, and embodying the enlightened activity of all Buddhas, because all those hindrances have been removed. So what I'm going to do is chant the Vajrakilaya chant. And this is seen to be medicine that, or rather a practice, any wrathful deity practice is there. One has to really stay within the bodhicitta motivation to practice any form of wrathful energy. And part of that is because this is seen to be a very powerful energy. So I'm not going to necessarily share slides, but as I chant this, I encourage you to, all of us rather, not you, but all of us, to send out from our circle or series of squares, hypothetical circle, out into the world, especially in places where there is much suffering, violence, war, and anything that is hostile to compassion. We radiate this aspiration of Vajrakilaya to remove the obstacles to peace, to harmony, and to wisdom. And this also stands for any obstacles or hindrances to just flourishing together on this planet. Anything in the way of evolving consciousness. Vajrakilaya, we appeal to Vajrakilaya. So his motivation, again, is fierce compassion. He is an ally. He is on our side when we are in our deepest sort of intention of cultivating love. Okay, so I'm going to chant this. Again, I invite you to just sort of hold the aspiration, the intention. The meaning of this chant is Vajra Kili Kilaya. So the word Kila has a couple of meanings: dagger, but it also means the sharpest point of the Dharmakaya, or a thunderbolt that just immediately removes the things that are unwholesome. So as the sharpest point of Dharmakaya, this is just pristine, utter clarity. And if you will, the clarity that comes from wrathful energy that is not destructive, not full of hatred and not harmful, but rather powerful.